We all know that effective internal communication is the secret to high-performing teams and companies. Did you know that according to a Tower Watson study, companies with effective employee communication tools see 47% higher total returns than businesses that communicate ineffectively? Beekeeper, a leader in employee communication, has developed an effective guide to help you understand your internal communications, especially if you work with a frontline team. Download Beekeeper's free guide today at www.beekeeper.io/crisis-averted-podcast. That's www.beekeeper.io/crisis-averted-podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Crisis Averted Podcast. I'm your host, CJ Arlotta. In this episode, I speak with Michael F. DeConzo, author of Two Nickels. Interesting fact, I've actually known Michael for many years. One of his sons and I were roommates in college. During our conversation, Michael shares what it was like picking up a manuscript 2 decades after writing it, how he knows when a piece of writing is good enough, and why you should never leave anything of importance in your pockets. Just a quick note about the recording, we recorded this episode last week, so when I mentioned that Michael's book signing is next week, please ignore that. It's actually this week. If you want to meet Michael, stop by Ralph's Sports Bar on Staten Island between 2 to 5 p.m. on June 12th. That's 2 to 5 p.m. on June 12th. Expect a reading, a Q&A, the Two Nickels soundtrack, and most certainly, a cast of characters. Feel free to send me your feedback at cj@cjmediasolutionsllc.com. Don't forget, if you're listening to the Crisis Averted podcast on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, review, or both. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Michael, thanks for coming on the Crisis Averted podcast today. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
I'm very happy to be here, Chris.
So for people who aren't familiar with you, mind sharing a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Well, I basically have been an educator for 30 plus years. I taught in intermediate schools. I taught in high schools, all on Staten Island. I actually taught in schools that I attended. So I taught in the intermediate school that I attended back in the early 70s, which was pretty crazy school. I taught in the high school that I graduated from. And I also taught in the college that I graduated from for my master's degree. So very much a Staten Island affair. There's my dog. Gatsby. I retired a few years ago from my high school gig, and I've been still teaching at the College of Staten Island. But the novel was always something that was kind of on the back burner. And when I retired 3 years ago, I kind of devoted some more time to it.
What'd you enjoy most about teaching?
The kids. The kids are great.
Yeah,
kids are great. They're so interesting. They're so funny. They have energy. They have ideas. And I would tell anybody who's going into education, you're going to have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy and protocols. But once you close the classroom door and it's you and 30-something kids, it's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Now, you mentioned you still teach a little bit now, correct?
Yes.
What do you enjoy most about that right now? Is it the same with the students? Is it anything different because it's a different type of level?
Well, what I'm teaching now is I teach educational classes.
Okay.
I teach how to teach English.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So all my students now are planning to become English teachers. So I'm preparing them for a future as an English teacher in the most likely the NYC DOE, but they go other places as well.
So you did mention your novel, right? So you just recently published a novel. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Now, how long did it take for you to put that novel together?
Over 20 years.
Oh, wow. So tell me a little bit about that story. Why did it take you so long? Did you end up stopping it because of teaching? Tell me that backstory.
I started it in the late 90s. which is one of the reasons why it's set in 1997. Okay. And I really enjoyed writing it, but at the time I was teaching in Curtis High School. I became an assistant principal at Curtis High School. I was teaching at the College of Staten Island, and I have a tremendous, wonderful, active family. So something had to give. Something had to give.
Right.
So the novel gave.
Yeah.
So I just kind of put it aside. I said, I'm not doing anybody justice by trying to juggle all these balls. So I put it away for probably about 15, 16 years.
Wow.
Right? And then when I retired from Curtis High School, from the DOE, I found it. It was down in my basement. And I said, let me take a look at it. And if I think it has any hope of being any good, maybe I'll return to it. And that took me months to kind of review it and look at it again. And I said, something this has some potential, but it needs a lot of work. But now I have time to kind of devote to it. And that's how it happened. And it took me about 3 years to get it finished.
Wow. When you picked the manuscript up again, how much did you have written?
It was a full novel.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't very good.
Okay.
it had a glimmer of hope. It had a glimmer of promise.
What didn't you like about it? What needed to be fixed?
The characters weren't fully developed. The story was pretty flat. I had an idea about his connection to Dante and Virgil, but it wasn't really, wasn't realized in the book. But I said it had some potential. So I said, maybe if I play around with it a little, I could make something of it. And that's what I did. But like I said, I had a lot more time to devote to it.
When you repick that novel back up, what did you think? What did you think about it that it allowed you to move forward with it? That book, you said it needed some work, but what was positive? What did you like about the novel, picking it back up after all those years?
I thought the characters were compelling. I liked Johnny Romano, the protagonist, for all his tendency to screw up. He's got a great heart, and to me, that's what I look for in a person. And he's a kind human being. And honestly, if this world needs anything, it's kindness. So even though he makes terrible choices, I thought that there's something to him that people may be drawn. And then it's Mary the blonde, his grandmother, Laura, his long-suffering girlfriend, Danino, the man who. I thought these were interesting characters. Like I said, the story wasn't there, but I really love the characters.
Now, you mentioned some of the characters already, but for people who haven't read the book, mind sharing a little bit about the book, what the story is?
So it's set in 1997, the week before Christmas. It opens on the protagonist, Johnny's 30th birthday. And he's an actor, but his career hasn't gone exactly the way he thought it would. And he's kind of in order to augment the money coming in, because he loves to spend money. He's a person who loves good food, fine wine, to be out in clubs, and in order to provide that life, he becomes a bookie. So he's taking bets in a bar in the West Village, and that's not going well. He ends up owing some bad people a lot of money. And that's kind of the premise of how he deals with that situation and who he meets. He meets a poet who believes he's Virgil, the Dante's guide in the Inferno. And this person kind of gets involved in his life, much to Johnny. Johnny doesn't want him in his life, but he gets involved in his life, and maybe Johnny learns a couple of lessons along the way.
Now, I hate asking writers this question, but where did you get the idea for this book?
It's. I love the idea of redemption. I love the idea that people, can make better choices and can find better ways to live their lives, but it takes some time. And it takes, you have to be out there. You have to experience life. So I love that idea. And the characters are very close to me because they're based on people that I grew up with. I know some family members. And I thought they really came to life. And that's why I stuck with it. I really couldn't give it up.
Do some of those family members know that you decided to write about them?
And despite that, they've read the book. Despite that,
yeah. And what do they think?
They really like it. One friend of mine, who's my best friend since kindergarten, said to me, he goes, I have to thank you for not putting me in the book. Meanwhile, he's in the book, but he didn't realize. Right? He didn't realize some of the aspects of one of the characters. But I mean, the one, my grandmother, Mary the Blonde, the Vito Genovese story that takes place on the corner of Spring and Sullivan. That's a true story. When she actually confronted Vito Genovese, so Mary the Blonde is very much Mary the Blonde. Unfortunately, she passed away about 15 years ago. But, my family and my kids and my wife, we always thought she would get a big kick out of this book because she was actually a store detective in Lord & Taylor. And she did set records. She was unbelievable. She was the Babe Ruth of store detective.
When you were writing this novel, I mean, you stopped it, you put it aside. Were you doing any other writing in between?
Yeah, I've written a lot of short stories, and a lot of them deal with these characters when they were younger. So a lot of these stories that I've written are about Johnny and his friend Ralphie and Danino, who runs the arcade, when these characters were 10 years old, 11 years old, 8 years old. So that's one of the things that I'm working on now. It's almost like a prequel.
So are you potentially putting together a short story collection then?
It is, but it's almost like a novel because it tells the story of these people from the time they're, like I said, like 8, 9 years old, and it runs up until they're in their early 20s. So there's a lot of connections with Two Nickels.
What were some of the challenges you faced when writing the novel? Obviously, you put it down and then picked it up later on. But what were some of your own writing challenges? And how did you see, I guess, your writing evolve over the years? Because you got to pick something up you wrote many years ago, and you got to kind of see what you were working on then.
It's like your writing is never good enough. It's never good enough.
Yeah.
So you look at something you wrote 20 minutes ago, and you say, "What is this?" Well, and then you read some, like you read Fitzgerald or you read Shakespeare or you read Hemingway, and you say, "What did I just put? How could I have the nerve to show this to anybody?" Right. So you're always pushing yourself to try to take it to the next level, and that's kind of what I did. I would get up very early in the morning. I would try to be up at the computer by 5:30. And try to revisit what I did the previous day because the previous day's work was not very good, and try to really elevate the writing to a level where it makes sense and it might be compelling, but it's very hard to write well, and I'm not even saying I did it, but I tried to do it.
Did you have a certain word count that you try to achieve each day?
Not really. I'm working on a story right now that I'm actually going to put online before the book signing. And I've been working on the story for a few years, and I'm still working on the first paragraph. And some days, just the second sentence, I think I have it, you know? And then some days I say, nah, that's not it. But that's not it. So, as far as word count, no. As far as quality, yes. So I might take eight hours to write one sentence, but I want that sentence to be as good as it could possibly be.
So you're rewriting while you're writing, then you're not necessarily getting it all out on the page and then going back to it at a later point.
No, constantly rewriting.
Yeah.
I liken it to like I really like house painting.
Okay.
I love painting rooms,
Hmm.
and I may I've painted every room in this house a few times, but I'm so meticulous with painting that as I'm painting, I'm repainting and I'm
Right.
repainting. So by the time I finish a room, and it might take me 2 days, it has 5 coats, and it's good for 10 years.
Right. Right.
It's good for 10 years. It'll last for 10 years because it got 5 coats in 2 days.
But when it comes to the writing process, then what are you looking for? How do you know when that sentence, when that paragraph is good enough for now? Because like you said, you never feel like it's good enough. I bet you could go back through your short stories or maybe your novel, and you'd probably want to rework something, just a paragraph or a sentence, or maybe you want to use a different word. How do you know it's good enough for now?
It's a great question, Chris. It's a great question. It just, it just kind of hits you. It just has a certain rhythm, and it has a certain, it just holds your attention. And like I said, I do this sentence by sentence, which is why it took 20 years to write this book. One of the reasons. But
Yeah.
you kind of know when it's right, and you definitely know when it's not right.
Right.
And honestly, I mean, the fact that I know that you read Two Nickels,
Yep.
and I know how busy you are, and I know how successful you are. So the fact that you devoted time to Two Nickels to read it, it's got to be good for you to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to waste your time. So I work really hard at making that reading experience, worthwhile for you, because I know we're all busy.
You have to nowadays too, right? I mean, everybody, you're competing for everybody's time, whether it's, work, computer, family. People can, they can read, they can, go watch movies, play games. There's so much people can be doing that you really need to do what you can to get their attention.
Absolutely. And it's not fair to you or to anyone else who's bought the book to give them something that's not as good as it can be.
Do you have somebody that you run your work by, an editor?
My wife.
Did
My
you
wife,
ever?
everything. Frankie was terrific. My son Frank.
Yep. I know him
my,
real well.
my other son Michael. And I had one friend that who I taught with at Curtis High School.
Yeah.
And he also retired. He was, the paragon of English teachers. And he read the book as well. And he made some great suggestions. And he really, so between my family and my very, very good friend, it kind of came to fruition finally.
Did they have a lot of the same concerns that you had with the manuscript at first? The original one?
They pointed out very interesting things that I didn't see, which was very, very cool. Things that I didn't think of. And once I thought of them, I said, "Wow! Like, how did I not see that?" But so I mean, the editor, the editor and the revision process is so important. And I had tremendous support in that respect.
Well, it's because you're so close to the work that sometimes you need somebody who's removed from it, right? Just to see if something's missing, if the story doesn't add up, if a character does something that the character normally wouldn't do. And I find that sometimes with writing too, if you just kind of write a short story and place it in the desk for a couple months and you go back to it, you start reworking so many different things because you've finally removed yourself from that story where you're able to see all the flaws or the holes in the story.
Absolutely. And you made just a really good point. The characters have internal consistencies, and they have to be true to themselves. And sometimes for plot's sake or for enjoyment's sake, you ask them to do things that they wouldn't do. But it's when you revisit, it's just so wrong. And then when you go back to it, you could see that. But other people see it way before you do.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you enjoy most about writing the book?
I love Staten Island, and I absolutely love Manhattan. And like I said, the novel's set in 1997. It was a different city back then. It was pre 9/11, and it was just revisiting that time and thinking. And people have actually said that to me. When you read the book, you feel like you're there. You feel like you're in the clubs, in the restaurants, walking the streets. And like I said, I love the city. I always tell everybody I could never move away from New York City. And just kind of putting my characters, and naturally myself in that environment, and how that environment impacts their decisions, their actions, what they say, who they befriend. That's kind of a thrill.
What advice would you give? And I'm asking this because you mentioned, picking the manuscript up after so many years. What advice would you give to people who maybe put something down 20, 15 years ago for whatever reason and are thinking about returning to it, whether it's a book or maybe they're working on music or anything of that nature? What would you recommend they do?
You have to believe in your ideas. You have to have confidence in what you love. So if you have an idea, and whether, as you just said, whether it's for music or a book or for a business, if you're thinking of starting a business and you have a concept and you keep on, you're drawn to it. And even if you try to step away from it, you're drawn back to it. That means something, So you have to follow your heart, and you have to follow your intuition and your gut, and not give up on ideas when deep inside they're valid and worthwhile, and they could bring you and maybe some other people's joy.
You mentioned that a lot of people said just reading the book, they felt like they were there in the clubs and the restaurants in that time period in the city. And I felt the same way. Do you journal at all, or did you just, recall all of that from memory?
I take a lot of notes. So anytime my wife washes my pants, there are 11 scraps of paper that are shredded in the washing machine. So
Right.
Maybe I save 11 and 11 get destroyed in the wash. It's a tragedy, Chris.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You may need to get a notebook then.
A lot of good ideas go down with the tide.
Yeah.
Go down with the tide. But,
Great.
But I'm always taking notes. I'm always writing on scraps of paper. I keep notebooks by my bed. I keep, even when I was teaching, I would tell my class, I need 2 seconds. I need 30 seconds to write this down. And I said, Mr. DeConzo, what are you doing? I have an idea. Just give me 30 seconds and we'll get back to the story. We'll get back to the lesson. But as far as like sitting down at a specific time to journal, no. But one of the things I do 5 times a day is walk my dog Gatsby. And in those walks, no telephones. I just walk the neighborhood and I kind of try to clear my head. And a lot of thoughts come to me then, and then we race home and I write everything down. I throw it in my back pocket and half of it is lost to the washing machine.
But that's so important, that walking time, right? Because I think that's where a lot of your ideas come from. You need some time to actually think in order to put something down on page. I know when I have clients who are going to, speak somewhere at a conference or wherever it is, in order to figure out what they have to say, they have to think about actually what they want to say. And you really need that time to put all your thoughts together.
I see people walking and they're talking on the phone, or they have their earphones in there. And I say, just kind of put that away for a while. Just take a look at what's out there. There's so much happening on the streets, so much interesting, good stuff, so many interesting people, so many interesting little conversations. Just kind of take that in, don't shut yourself off from all of this really interesting, good stuff that's happening around you that a lot of times we're not aware of, So just kind of like be yourself and observe and think. And that's kind of my process.
What are some of the challenges younger writers are having now? I know you said that you're teaching students to become, to to teach English, but are some of those students writers? Do they come to you with questions and challenges? Any challenges that maybe you faced, or any new challenges that a new generation of writers is facing?
I mean, I think I do have students who are absolutely wonderful writers. And I think the biggest challenge is time. Everyone is so busy these days, and so they're going to school, they're working two jobs, they have family obligations, they have commitments. It's very hard to find the time to dedicate to your craft. Everyone's pulled in so many different directions. And I think that, and it's hard to say, excuse me, but I'm going to go write for 3 hours. It's not really fair, because writing is a very individual, and it's almost a selfish thing to do in a way. And I think that that's a big challenge to kind of carve out that time to write. I think the pandemic helped a little because it kind of slowed things down a little. But I think that now we're, thank God, mercifully coming out of it. I think we're all going to be pulled in a million directions again. And I think that's absolutely wonderful, but not necessarily good for writing.
What tips
or any kind of creative action?
What tips do you have for young writers?
You have to really love what you write about. And I know, that's the age old suggestion, write what you know, write what you love. But it's really true, because it's so hard. It's so hard to put something worthwhile on paper that unless you are not 1,000% committed to it, it's not good. You can't write what you think people want to read. Impossible. Like I said, when I wrote Two Nickels, I had no idea who was going to like this book. I said, maybe some middle-aged guys will get a kick out of it. Honestly, maybe some middle-aged guys, maybe guys my age will say, yeah, I remember growing up this way. This was just, but I was very surprised that women really liked the book, and young people liked the book. I was shocked. I was shocked at that, but I think a lot of it is, there's a lot of honesty in the book, and that only comes from writing, again, what you know, but also writing what you love.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I mean, the book is funny, it's well written, and it's definitely worth, joining you on that journey. You mentioned before that you are putting together a novel or a collection of short stories of the sort. Do you have an estimated, an ETA on that for when that's going to publish?
Probably late fall or early spring of next year.
Okay, that's exciting. And
I have about 5 or 6 stories done, but it's interesting because as I'm writing these stories, they're like creating other stories.
Right. Yeah.
So it just seems like every time a character does something in one story, there's kind of a follow-up to that I'm considering writing. But I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Where can people get the book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble. It's available in the Staten Island Mall, in the bookstore in Barnes and Noble in Staten Island. But most people are buying it through either their local bookstore, ordering it through their local bookstore, or Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
And I believe also you have a book signing, I believe next week. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Thank you for asking, Chris. Yeah. It's I wanted to schedule it. A lot of people have been asking me, because a lot of people have, a lot of my friends have moved away from Staten Island. So they're in Jersey, they're in Florida, they're in California, and they said, "Well, when can I get the book signed? How am I going to get the book signed?" But because of COVID, I kind of held off on it. But we decided on Saturday, June 12th, at Ralph's Sports Bar on Staten Island, from 2 to 5, we're going to have this book signing. It's a book signing, but it's also just as kind of a celebration of everyone who's been so supportive, including my children and my family and my wife and my friends and you. of this whole process. So that should be a lot of fun. That should be a great afternoon.
I'm looking forward to it, Michael. Thanks for coming on the podcast today, and I'll talk with you soon.
Chris, thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.